We've got a question from Fiona who says, my property has a wooden sleeper retaining wall at the rear of the property that's approximately 1 metre away from the complex perimeter fence. So I assume that's about 1 metre within Fiona's courtyard area. When I recently purchased my property, I was advised that the wall has wood rot and is at high risk for termites. I had a company out to give me a quote to replace the retaining wall with concrete sleepers and was advised that the retaining wall actually runs the whole length of the complex, and I was not able to replace all of the wall in my yard as I would compromise the whole retaining wall. The contractor said I would need to contact all of my neighbours to get the owners to replace their portion of the wall in their yard. I would like to know, since the wall runs along the whole complex and is holding dirt back at the complex perimeter fence, why is it not a body corporate cost, and how would I go about getting the whole length of the wall replaced? So, very interesting question from Fiona. The crux of this question is, what are the responsibilities when it comes to retaining walls? Now, it's important to note that retaining walls and fences, whilst they're often on top of each other and they sort of perform a similar boundary function, retaining walls and fences have completely different rules when it comes to who pays for them and whose responsibility they are. So the general principle with a fence, so a fence is a wall that's above the ground, like a normal timber fence or a colorbond fence. That's generally a 50-50 split between the two neighbours. So with a retaining wall, however, the retaining wall is generally the responsibility of the person whose land it is constructed on. So in theory, a lot owner can't construct a retaining wall on someone else's land. So if you've got two pieces of property on a sloping hill, and one person wanted to flatten their block of land out to make it a bit easier to build on, or have a nice flat yard, that person would generally need to build a retaining wall on their own land, and therefore reduce the available amount of space on their property but make it flatter. So following that principle, generally the landowner is responsible for the retaining wall on their land, no matter whether it runs across multiple pieces of land and no matter who built it. So in Fiona's case, I would have to have a look at whether that particular body corporate is a building format plan or a standard format plan. In a standard format plan, that's where owners own the land within the body corporate as well as the building. So a standard format plan is most similar to house ownership. So a standard format plan is where the owner of each lot owns the land on which their property is constructed. So a standard format plan body corporate is actually fairly similar to a normal house block when it comes to maintenance responsibilities. The owner of each lot owns their rectangle of land and the buildings on top of that land. So in a standard format plan, Fiona would own the land as well as her individual property, which means the retaining wall or the section of retaining wall on Fiona's land would be Fiona's own responsibility. If Fiona was in a building format plan of subdivision, generally speaking, the same rules would apply, and Fiona would not own the backyard of her house or townhouse, but would typically have exclusive use of it. So if it's within a private area that Fiona has the exclusive enjoyment of, then anything within that area, including a retaining wall, would generally be Fiona's responsibility to repair or replace. The practical considerations are really a separate discussion altogether. So if because of the lay of the land or the type of wall or how it was built, if it's not possible for individual lot owners to maintain their own section of the wall and it needs to be done as a group project where the whole wall is repaired or replaced and the cost divided up, it does require that each of the responsible owners discusses that among themselves and comes to an agreement. So in that way, it's quite similar to if Fiona and her neighbours were just in sort of ordinary freestanding houses and they shared a retaining wall that ran across the front or the back or the side. A lot of the work in body corporate does still require that owners get together and deal with shared responsibilities and shared issues in a conciliatory way. If Fiona and the other lot owners were unable to come to a resolution on how to repair that wall, the body corporate may have an ability to issue each lot owner with a direction to bring the wall into good condition. And if those lot owners fail to do that, the body corporate may gain a power to actually carry out that work and charge or invoice those lot owners for the cost. So that's obviously not an ideal situation where the body corporate would have to get itself involved in something that the lot owners should be dealing with directly, but there may be a resolution there. In our recent article about retaining walls, we do strongly encourage bodies corporate to obtain legal advice on each individual retaining wall question as it arises, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that the law in terms of retaining walls and ownership and responsibility is much more complicated than fencing. And secondly, retaining walls are generally much more expensive to repair or replace. So a body corporate should not undertake a major project with retaining walls based on any assumptions, and it should be getting some qualified advice in relation to who should be paying the cost, who should be doing what, and who has the ability to, pull the trigger and sign that building contract. Because if a retaining wall project goes off the rails for any number of reasons, it's really important that the body corporate is protected and that each affected lot owner knows exactly where they stand in terms of the law and their responsibilities.